So we need to have a conversation about D&D, about the RPG world, about Wizards of the Coast, about some of the chaos that has happened recently and lately. And I want to start with a strong caveat. I've been following along with this story to the best of my ability by consuming many other social media creators. I don't know their names immediately off the top of my head, but I will leave a link to 2 or 3 other videos that I have really enjoyed that have given me more context into what has been happening with, what's the official title?
The OGL?
The OGL. But along with that, I have invited up a friend, Tony from Plus One EXP, one of my personal favorite RPG channels that's out there in the market, a channel that has convinced me to invest and explore and invest in a lot of really cool indie zine projects, really cool alternative RPG universes, and just an expansive world of D&D and storytelling and the hybrid of where board games overlap with that region. So I am going to, join in this conversation a little bit, but I really wanted to start the conversation off by opening the floor to you, because I think you have some context and some thoughts around this that are different from my perspective and different from my ability to articulate.
Yeah, and I don't want to dive into the same conversations everyone else has had. Like you said, let's link to those. There's been some great parts of that conversation.
Jenny D is one of them. There's an amazing lawyer that's talked about it. Man Shorts has done some content on it.
And then Linda Codega's blog that really kind of started breaking it open, and Linda's continued coverage of what's been happening with it has been really, really good and up to date on everything that's been going on.
I'll make sure to follow up and have that link in the description as well. The 30 seconds on this is that Wizards of the Coast has made a variety of choices over the last year, both in the Magic world and here in the D&D world, that seems to have prioritized profit over community in a variety of ways. So for instance, in the Magic world, they did a full recycle and reprint of cards that were supposed to be limited and rare and exclusive. They did it at a markup that was insane, and the community universally rejected it in a crushing blow. And then following on the heels of that, they released the updated OGL, the updated terms of service.
If they had released it, that might have been a little bit better for them.
Was leaked, I believe.
It came out.
The updated OGL, or the intention from this company, came out, and what it was doing was rewriting the terms and conditions that had created a world full of personal creation and personal exploration and security in a system that was kind of supposed to be open source anyway.
Correct.
And it designed it and directed it in a way that clearly stated, we want to raise our bottom line by 2 times in the next 3 years.
Right. And the most challenging part about this, in addition to it threatening people's livelihood, being bad action, violating the expectations and trust of a community that has grown this, because at the end of the day, the reality is, like, Dungeons and Dragons, especially 5th edition, has pride of place because of a whole host of creators who have been creating content for it and for 3.5 and 3.0 edition.
For my audience, that's largely board gamer, and we're going to have some RPG adjacent folk here. Can you give me a 30 on what the core crux of the issue or the conflict is?
Yeah.
Because there's some nuanced stuff there that requires context before we continue the conversation.
Open Game License was what the OGL stands for. Basically states, hey, you can create content using the core rules and some of the terminology from Dungeons and Dragons. However, there are some things that are off limits and you can't use that might be part of something called the Systems Reference Document, or SRD, right? So these are 2 different documents that you can use to create homebrew content, put content online for consumption in certain avenues, or produce holistically and entirely new systems based on those ideas.
It's where games and publishers like Humblewood come from. A game that is adjacent enough to our industry that I think a lot of people in the board game space will be familiar with it, raised millions in this world of ethereal forest creatures, and it created all of its own stuff, except for maybe the core rules set or rules system that introduced people that already play D&D into a brand new world of exploration.
Or in RPG world, the next most common system that a lot of people are familiar with, Pathfinder, which became a competitor to Wizards because of the release of the OGL and some of the disagreements that happened
specifically
early on.
In a season where there were restrictions happening to that open license. And so a community of people said, great, if you won't give us the security we need, the trust that we need to design in your building, to play in your playground, then we'll make our own
our own company, yeah. And so you have a lot of companies like that, as well as, again, then small creators who are like, I may make my living publishing things on DM's Guild underneath this license, and that is how I survive month to month and day to day.
And then the biggest of them all, which would be people like Critical Role that are taking the D&D platform and expanding it to a brand new world, but also alongside that, there's the opportunity for monetization, for TV shows, for spin-offs, and all of that is weirdly tied up in this bundle.
And it gives one company, not just Wizards of the Coast, but Hasbro, a lot of undue influence in the way that a lot of different creators operate. And there was a sense of, you're supporting us, but really what they were doing is very cleverly investing in community-based marketing and then trying to pull back on that and make substantive changes.
Okay.
Setting aside all of the details.
There's the framework.
Right.
There's other people that do all of that better than us, but I thought it was important to try to establish a bit of context for anyone who hasn't followed closely along.
Right. And I think here's what's missing. We have to pay attention anytime a large creator, a large publishing company, whether it's Wizards of the Coast or whether it's a board games company, when they do things like this within the community, we have to pay attention to what they're saying. We were talking yesterday about people tell you who they are, right?
Sure.
Like, this is a conversation that we were having.
It's a concept that I've heard when it comes to dating, but it also comes to relationships and stuff like that. If you are going out on a date with someone and they keep referring to themselves and saying, I'm just kind of an idiot, or I would do that, but I'm just really lazy. And they do so even in a joking manner or a self-deprecating manner. Oftentimes you should trust them.
Right.
They will betray you. They are lazy. They are just a bit of an idiot. Or if they're like, I'm really good at my job, or I'm really proud of what I just did, or I love working out, they are also that in a way.
And so after all the OGL stuff came out, Wizards went through a lot of machinations, again, followed the links down below to hear a lot about those changes, and eventually came out with
lost.
A pseudo-apology where they didn't lose, we all won together.
Yes.
Where they tried to play things off in a very kind of casual, this is exactly what we wanted the whole time format.
And a comment from me, a way as someone who has followed the magic side of this conversation, I am heavily wary of the tactical pullback.
Right.
And the we'll wait till things calm, because that's what has happened in Magic over the last few years.
And it's what's happened in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition over the last few years.
Okay.
They continually violate the community's expectations, but they know that people are very invested in the system, in the community, and the identity of Dungeons and Dragons. When people use the term Dungeons and Dragons, they're oftentimes not talking about 5th edition. They might be talking about 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or even 4th, some people, edition.
Almost just RPGs in general.
Right. And whether that's a good thing or not, it's a thing.
I'm going to go play some D&D.
Right.
That's the same statement
What do you use to play D&D? Oh, we use Trophy Dark to play D&D, right? Like, no Trophy Dark player would probably say that, but we may be playing Call of Cthulhu. We may be playing Pathfinder. We may be playing a totally different system.
I know when I'm on camera,
D&D.
As a board game influencer, I oftentimes say D&D, RPG, and that is an interchangeable. I know there's a difference, but in my general flow of language, there's an interchangeability there that's important.
Right. And so we know that term is used by a lot of different people in a lot of ways, but what I want to point out with the conversation is Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast have told us who they are a number of times in the last year, and they've told us who they are a number of times before that. But they bank on the community quickly forgetting that they told us who they are. Oh, they went through all this, and so in the end, they gave up some major things. They made the 5th edition SRD Creative Commons. They made a big deal about making the mechanics Creative Commons, but you can't trademark mechanics. So they didn't do anything with that. They didn't give us anything with that.
Deck building is not owned by a company.
Correct.
The language around deck building might be.
Right. And so the reality is they didn't give us that much. We can use a couple of terms we couldn't use before in creation now because the SRD was made available to the public, and once something's Creative Commons, there is no way to pull that back. Like it is in the Creative Commons space, which is good for all those creators that we talked about. It's good, but here's the thing, and here's the subtle thing. By acknowledging that, by celebrating that, by continuing to participate in the Creative Commons SRD and OGL, right, those two documents, by using those, we are acknowledging that Wizards has the ability to lay claim to these terms and adjust and address how different elements of them are perpetuated into the future, right? So they've already told us where they want to go. That initial leaked draft was not a draft they wanted out.
We
it
would
was
like
a draft
to
they intended
restrict
to
and
release.
monetize third-party assets and creativity.
Right. We want to be able to have access to your IP. We want to create more profitability in what we're doing in a thousand different ways. There's been tons of misinformation out there that I don't want to replicate. They are not going to adding a $30 a month subscription fee for D&D Beyond. But they've already figured out tons of ways to monetize D&D Beyond, and we'll probably be doing more of them in the future.
One of the ways that actually made me not join D&D Beyond was I downstairs have a full set of one of the first run of 10 5th edition books. And I went online to D&D Beyond, and every one of those had to be purchased again at full price on the website instead of having any type of crossover code. That was one of the initial experiences that to me went, oh, why? Why are you selling me this again? I just bought your book.
Right. And they could just solve that problem if they wanted to. There's nothing, historically there was, modernly, there's nothing that prevents Wizards from solving that problem, but they won't.
Or even a single-use discount.
Right. Or just make it available. I mean, charge $5 or $10 a month if you want to, for access to an entire library, because you are putting out stuff constantly. Make it so that people can upload a picture of their book.
But there's some degree of bad faith that's designed around profit.
Right. And again, we can talk about corporations, about late-stage capitalism, all kinds of stuff.
I'm not necessarily against profit either. There's an interesting conversation for me, and this might be a tangent. I'll give it back to you in a second. But for me, as someone that actually is very entrepreneurial, I like business. I like people being able to earn money. I think if things add value, you should be paid for them. Believe in all those things. And yet at the same time, I do think there is a point in a company, whether it is small, medium, or large, where you do have to take a moment and say, we're really good right here.
Right.
We're really good at raising $120,000 a year, or our $5 billion organization probably doesn't need to go to $20 billion. Or it might be a really good $5 billion company.
Or asking, if we want to make more money, how are we reinvesting and making ourselves a better company? 5th edition just largely released old books. They did some really amazing things like Radiant Keep with some absolutely phenomenal designers from all over the globe. There were some new things that came out in 5th edition, but overwhelmingly the major properties were things that already exist that they updated, did a little expansion on, that people had already bought, and they bought a new version
of. No way a commentary on the writers, the artists, the designers, the people they have brought in to collaborate with them. Of course those people should be doing that.
Right.
Of course.
Of course.
However, there is a company beyond that that we're talking about.
And again, how are they taking the more and more money that they are earning, the profits that they want, and if they are going to be pursuing those profits, how are they reinvesting them in making the game better, and making the community better, and making things more accessible, and paying people better, because they don't do a good job with that. Those are questions that I would want to see tackled that would make me curious about what's happening. But what we're really setting ourselves up for as 1D&D comes out is for them to say, yeah, sure, we gave you 5th edition.
And 1D&D
and we gave you OGL, but 1D&D is a totally new thing, and it's the thing going forward. So if you want to keep on going
in 1D&D space, you're agreeing to a brand new OGL.
Right. And they will have full control over that.
How soon is 1D&D rolling out?
2025-ish is what we're really see that happening, right? And we'll see what happens. My big thing has been, a lot of people have even started forgetting, hey, this was an issue a few weeks ago. We have to kind of say, hey, we need to not let them just make whatever rules they want to, because, again, a lot of things they're trying to communicate to the community, we own this, we can decide what happens to it, are not true. And there are people who have been playing 1st edition Dungeons & Dragons for 20, 30, 40 years with no problem, with better support as time has gone on. That has nothing to do with where Dungeons & Dragons is headed in the future. Those people are playing a totally different game. There will be people who stop at 5th edition and stay with 5th edition. There are people who stopped with 3.5 and stayed with 3.5.
There's going to be an advent in a generation of people that are introduced to 1D&D, period.
Right. And 1D&D is still set to go capture new people who have only ever heard the term Dungeons & Dragons for meaning RPGs. And they're planning on their ability to capture those new people and pretend like this never happened. So for me, the real challenge is, can we start to remember who Hasbro is, who Wizards of the Coast are, when they tell us who they are, when they show us what they want out of their relationship with us? Let's remember that. And let's decide, do we want that, or do we want to push back as hard as possible and say, that is not the relationship we are looking for.
And I'm going to bring up another company here, not to cast any dispersions, but because there is a good example in my mind of a company taking the time to listen and adjust. You have Kickstarter, who historically, their biggest funding platform has been the board game industry, and they have not, as a corporation, listened, cared, or invested in the things that the board game industry have been demanding, to the response of BackerKit and GameFound being able to take some degree of their market share.
Absolutely.
And in response to that, they've elected a brand new CEO or board of directors. That board of directors has listened to the audience and due to popular demand has placed a brand new head of Kickstarter. I don't know his official title, but they've placed him in, and Kickstarter for the first time was at a convention. Kickstarter for the first time is implementing brand new things, is listening and calling publishers. I mean, I talked with a publisher recently that has made Kickstarter hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the brand new director and his team, instead of being pestered to the point of responding, initiated and called and said, "Hey, we saw your commercials, we saw your stuff online. How can we invest in you?" And yes, it's a bit of market pressure that's causing them to shift, but I think it's beyond that. I think it's them taking a second to look at where their community is and actually listening and responding to that. That doesn't mean that there's not trust that needs to be built back up.
Correct.
But I want to leave room for Wizards and Hasbro to do that in these communities as well. There is room, I think, to rebuild and grow, I hope.
Right.
To put the right people in charge, to put the right framework in place.
And even within that, like the games department, the staff there, John and Nicole, like absolutely tremendous people, were creators on the platform, are game designers, and are now the ones running the games department. So a big reason we saw Kickstarter at a convention was because John and Nicole go to that convention. Yeah. They are part of that community. They know what it's like to be on the other side of that conversation.
So let's
and
get
that
people that love
D&D
more than love money into position.
And
Good
not
business
not
people,
just and
not
just
bad business,
right.
but people who love this.
And not just as the scapegoat and the face when things go wrong, trying to spin for them.
Let them make choices. I think it'll make companies overlook the fact that the creative and the creator designed and built their organization, and at a certain point, corporate structure comes into place because it's necessary to run a successful business. But they lose track at that point of the fact that the creative and the creator are still the heartbeat of what they've made.
Right.
And if they let that heartbeat die, they'll lose their community.
And my big thing would be, and if they don't do that, if they don't invite those voices in, if they don't do the work, if they don't change, then start looking for other systems that might actually do what you want to do.
Let's give some people some options.
Yeah, so I've got a couple games here that are a little bit different. We're going to talk about some more of them in a different video. But a few I want to pull out because they have very different ways of doing things, but provide a lot of the same experience people are looking for with 5th edition. Would be something like Mazes, which uses the polymorph system, right? It's by 9th level games, Philadelphia based. These are people who've been embedded in the RPG community for a long time. We've got a chance to play with Chris a lot. Polymorph, you only roll one size die based on the type of thing you are. You have all the classic Dungeons & Dragons classes and vibes, backgrounds, other stuff like that, but you're only going to roll one die, and you're going to have a different range for success based on what you are. So are you a magical character, D4, you're going to crit a lot, you're going to have lots of really cool things pop off, but you're going to fail a lot also too. For a really big beefy character, you're going to roll a D10. You're going to be really good at combat, but if you try to do magic, probably not. And you have special things, but it creates a very cool version of that. And they love people designing in the polymorph system. The math is also really cool for the way the system works.
Cool.
We've got settings. If you're just looking for a setting guide, like things like Into the Weird and Wild by Charlie Ferguson Avery.
Climb into the backwoods and live your nightmare.
Right. Absolutely great. Explore the wild spaces between towns. Crazy factions, lethal spaces, cool plants and animals and other things, and completely randomly generated forest enclaves that you can look at. Totally a little bit of a diversion, but like this is a game that sells itself. Himbos of Myth and Metal by Max Lander. Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous little book. Huge board games. You can also pick them up at over on our website. We've got about 40 copies over there. But you are
39.
playing. You're playing as Himbos, 39 copies. And so your character sheets, your stats are hands. Your stats are your stats are hands, thighs, lips, and chest. right?
Chess, yes.
Yeah,
That's
and
the
chess.
word.
That's
And
what
chess,
that is.
yep.
Very different, but you're playing basically the lovable side character himbo, and if you become a hero, you become scarred and toxic if that happens. So the goal is to maintain being the lovable, powerful sidekick as long as you possibly can. And it's an absolutely phenomenal, very different take on fantasy.
I'm so intrigued.
These two games are so near and dear to my heart. I consider them sibling games for each other. This is Trophy by Gauntlet Publishing. The third-party creator community on this, the adventures, the incursions, are absolutely phenomenal. This is Loom. This is basically how to create in the world of Trophy. Trophy Gold is your classic dungeon fantasy with upkeep of resources being really high, pursuing treasure. And then Trophy Dark is a play-to-lose version where you're slowly going mad as you work your way towards the center of a forest that also doesn't want you there.
You know what type of things I
know you do.
You know I'm in.
But Gauntlet is constantly investing in its community of creators. Cool. They have micro grants. They have other things that you can do. And it's a fully open system. Like, you don't need anybody's permission to create in almost any of these or do things with it. Down we go. This is a story game that emulates classic fantasy tropes. This is a classic D20 system that has a whole lot of narrative pop to it. This is Down We Go. Our house system, again, a fully open license. The core rules are Creative Commons. We have micro grants that we also use to support creators who want to do it. If you create something in this, we'll want to help you publish it. But this is our house fantasy and OSR system. Cool. OSR meaning old school style play, but they'll do the exact same type of things and have familiar mechanics if you've played 5e, a D20 plus a modifier, some similar vibes, other stuff like that, and be able to do a lot more of what people typically are looking to do when they play 5e, and that's tell a big grand story about the adventures that they go on. So there's a lot of designers, a lot of creators who are doing totally unique, original things, who are also telling you who they are.
That are opening up systems that are not more intimidating, not harder to get into. In fact, a lot of these systems are actually going to be slightly more accessible, easier to onboard your team. Like D&D, despite how universal it is, there's a lot of paperwork and time that goes into running a system like this.
And you're going to buy 2 or 3 books or a big starter set. Most of these games, the entire system is going to cost you $35, $20, $15 and do as much exploration adventures if you want to, and they release additional support, adventures, modules, other things like that, and are designed for a very similar experience and a very easier package, and you can learn how to play in 5 to 10 minutes.
So, the end of the conversation, the final wrap-up. I'll say my thoughts, and then I'll leave room for you to say your thoughts, and then I'll let you sign off. My thoughts are as follows. I came into the hobby through D&D, through RPGs, through exploring it at a local game shop, through listening to Matthew Mercer and his entire cast journey on adventures, through diving into the weird, quirky world of, what's the brothers?
The McElroys, the Adventure Zone.
Of the incredible McElroy brothers, and the RPG system that their father joined them for and ran as well. And so I will always have this little bit of me that's like, passionate about and invested in and nostalgic for the D&D and the world that, you know, Wizards and Hasbro now own and control and continue to invest in. I want to see them succeed. I'm excited and will be buying a ticket to the brand new D&D movie that's coming out. I want to see our nerd culture and our nerd world continue to exist and continue to grow, and D&D is doing that. And at the same time, this, for me and for a lot of people in this space, I think is a big red flag in terms of investing what we put our passion and our trust into, what we put our private time into, what our play space allows in around the table. There's a big question mark here, and we are brothers with the Magic community in that question mark. Is a company, is a corporation going to value profit at the sacrifice of brand and long-term potential?
Right.
And that's one of the things that's the most hurtful for me is you could get profit today, or you could theoretically continue to grow a brand that revolutionizes our industry and continues to revolutionize our industry for another 17 generations. Mm-hmm. And there's a difference there. One of them is immediate reaping, immediate rewards, harvest what you've already sown, and the other is store up seeds and store up resources and build a community like they've done, and the companies before them that before they were bought out have done so well from generation to generation and from season to season of gaming right now. So I want to leave room and permission for Hasbro and Wizards to continue doing and taking steps that are going in the right direction. At the same time, I think we as a community should listen to what they have said and who they have said they are. Like you wisely.
Well, I mean, I was.
But you're
quoting you.
you're wisely pointing out it is very hard to trust someone to tell you who they actually are, and it's worth doing.
Yeah,
that's my say. I'm backing off.
So for me, I won't be going to see the new Dungeons and Dragons movies. As excited as I would have been before some of this to go see it, right now it's really hard for me to even think about putting money in Hasbro's pocket. Will I pirate it later? Probably not. The reality is, though, I do love seeing the big box office thing. I love seeing nerd culture and things that I love have popular appeal. I love increasing accessibility of things, but they can't be at the sacrifice of other people. We can't say, hey, we're stepping on the necks and the backs of those who have come before in order to just reach out and grab for one more dollar. And I don't have any judgment for you or for anybody who goes to see it. I think if people continue to play 5th edition, I really want to encourage them to play the game that they love. But I think it's a great time to start thinking about, look, I may have reasons I've never looked at another system before, but this is a great time to be asking the question about what are other things that might do what I love about D&D, that maybe I even take back to my home game, that I can learn from, that I can do differently, that I can think about in a different way. And if you want to use D&D to mean any RPG you sit down and play, I heartily endorse that, because the reality, it has such a pride of place in the history of our culture, and it means something very specific, and it is one of the really uniquely American art forms in our culture. Like, it is Midwestern folk art that was then collated and put together and published and produced, and has grown over the course of the last 50 years into what it is now, and into an entire industry.
I want to listen to you for an hour
of different
about
games.
the history of the RPG world.
And so, but I think because it's what's accessible, a lot of times people think it is what is best or easiest, or that it's trying to do the most for the most people. And I don't think that's true. McDonald's is readily available everywhere, but McDonald's is not necessarily the best food you'll get. Do I eat McDonald's sometimes? Yes. Sometimes is that incredibly satisfying? Absolutely.
I stopped like a year and a half ago and I haven't gone back.
But the reality is, it's not good for me, and it's not necessarily what cuisine is. And there's a whole beautiful world of RPG cuisine out there that our channel at Plus One EXP is dedicated to helping people easily navigate into. And in the same way that Jesse breaks down board games, shares them with you, we do short 5-minute videos on how to play or try a new system. And we're going to be talking about some more of those also too, along with diving a little bit deeper into some of the ones that we've already mentioned. But take a look at what's out there. Decide how you want to be engaging with Wizards of the Coast, and listen to them when they tell you who they are. My name's Tony Vicenda from Plus One EXP. And remember to do the important thing.
Be kind. We'll see you next time.